Welcome to an on-demand class from Mile High Church, 4 power practices to uplift your life. I'm Josh Reeves, and this is...
I'm Michelle Medrano.
And we have the honor of being the lead ministers here at Mile High Church. And wherever you're tuning into this class from around the world, we welcome you here.
We're delighted that you're joining us.
Yeah, and this class is all about spiritual practices, so I thought I'd begin, Michelle, by asking you, what is a spiritual practice?
For me, a spiritual practice is any practice that I step into to help me rediscover my center, my sacred nature. Here at Mile High Church, we believe that there's a presence in this universe that we equate to be God, that is expressing through everything and everyone, including us. And so anything that I do to return myself back to an awareness, an experience, a sense of my sacred inner self, my true self. Yeah. What about for you?
Well, one of my favorite quotes from Ralph Waldo Emerson is that which is best, which returns me to myself.
Yes.
So there's a good definition of spiritual practice right there. And for me, at its most basic, anything that I do with awareness of the sacred could be considered a spiritual practice. There's the sacred and spiritual ones, like the ones that we're talking about this class, meditation, prayer, forgiveness, gratitude, and appreciation. And there's also secular practices as well. Being in the garden, even washing the dishes could be a spiritual practice if you do it in awareness of the sacred. And an essential part of spiritual practices for me is they're things that help us come fully into the present moment. They help free my mind from worrying about the future or being stuck in the past, so that I feel one with the life that I'm living. And it almost always enriches my life in incredible ways.
I like that. My cup of coffee is one of my sacred spiritual practices.
It is. It's the first one of my day. And they say that the Sufis had a lot to do with popularizing coffee as a way to keep alert during meditation. The Sufis being that Islamic mysticism that we see today.
That's one of the secrets to my success.
There you go. And how long has spiritual practices been an integral part of your life?
Well, integral is the key word there, because I started taking classes here at Mile High when I was 18 years old. And as a teenager, I had this perception of having this kind of ultra busy life and social life. And it took a few years for me to really understand the importance and value of spiritual practice. So it was probably about 5 years later. So it's been, I'm much older now, so probably a good 30, 40 years that I've been involved in spiritual practice, mostly on a regular basis. Very rarely miss a day of what I would call spiritual practice, for sure.
And then what would you say some of the benefits have been in not just your spiritual life, but your personal life?
Well, Dr. Patty Lukenbach here taught us in practitioner training a phrase that has always stuck with me, and I think she still teaches it to her students these days, which is the phrase jump to center. And so for me, one of the things that spiritual practices do for me is that no matter where I am or what I'm doing, no matter if it's a moment of joy and fun and sacredness, or it's a moment of chaos and confusion, those words come to me, jump to center, because I will use them in my spiritual practice. And so they're almost it's like there's a pathway in my brain that is just really clearly there, that I can jump to center when I do. And I find that serves me so well, that I can be the calm in a storm at times. In the center of a storm can be that calm space, inside and out, because I've learned to go to that inner space, as well as the benefits of, I think there's neurological benefits and deep spiritual benefits of just feeling in touch with myself. How about for you? How long have you been in spiritual practice?
Well, I've been doing it over 20 years now, but just from hearing what you're saying, what I get the sense as well is that spiritual practice helps us develop that center to jump back to, and it helps strengthen it so that it's something that we feel no one else can take away from us. And that's one of the benefits that's been for me. And I remember I had just started driving, and at the time there was a popular bumper sticker from Noam Chomsky, a political one, and it says, "If you're not outraged, you're not paying attention." You remember that?
Yes.
And I think I just started thinking of it in a spiritual sense, in the sense that if I'm not realizing the blessings of life, I'm not paying attention. If I'm not feeling connected with myself or with people I care about, I'm not paying attention. And I started looking, what's going to help me pay attention. And spiritual practices is really what has helped me do that. And as we'll talk about it, it wasn't about finding an hour a day to be in meditation or anything like that. It was just beginning by taking that cup of coffee, a good book, and sitting and just really appreciating life. And over time, what that's developed for me is almost like an extra layer of awareness. Buddhism, they use the term the witness, but that hasn't always been my favorite term, because it almost sounds like I'm back there watching myself from somewhere.
The observer, too.
Yes, the observer. But for me, it's allowed me this layer of awareness that helps me know whether or not I'm having a great day or a challenging day. There's part of me that knows the truth of who I am, that there's a fundamental good or hope in life, and that my whole self is with me, even in the pieces of my life. And it sounds perhaps a little bizarre, but for me, everything that happens in my day, I can trace back to the spiritual practice that I did that morning.
Oh, that's fascinating.
The consciousness that I was able to set. So as opposed to just reacting to all the stuff that happens in life, and I still react, not in a way I'm proud of for here or there, but for the most part, I'm able to respond from the affirmations and the consciousness I was able to set for that day, from a place of being loving to my family or being supportive of individuals. So spiritual practice isn't just an essential part of my spiritual life, it's kind of how I survive as well.
A survival tool. Maybe we should change the title of the class.
Exactly. And it's really helped make me who I am, and proud of myself as well.
Wonderful. Yeah. That's a really great way of looking at it.
Yeah,
thanks.
you. And you mentioned Dr. Patty. Anyone else really influence you in your spiritual practices or authors?
I will say that some of the most influential people for me around spiritual practice have actually been students that I've worked with, because I can say without a shadow of a doubt, the one thing that students come back and tell me time and time again, and maybe this is true for you, I didn't exactly believe you when you suggested that I get a spiritual practice. I thought maybe you were over-exaggerating the importance of that. But then upon actually stepping into some practice for myself, I discovered that it was the key essential thing that helped me in my life more than anything I'd ever read, anything that I'd ever heard, anything that I've ever done to improve myself. And so over the years, hearing that time and time and time again from students that I've worked with has continued to inspire me to recognize that that's what's true for me also.
I love that. And in teaching classes, what I often say to students is, if you get anything out of this, I hope it's a daily spiritual practice.
Yes.
There's another old Sufi saying that goes something like, if you're hungry, watching someone eat won't feed you. And in the same way, reading or watching someone's spiritual experience isn't going to give that to you either.
Right.
And so it's our own ability to create sacred space for ourselves, and to find whatever ways to go within and connect with life that give us that spiritual experience. And the idea with spiritual practice is we're never supposed to do it to try to create success in our lives, but what I've found is that byproduct of connecting with a higher power and getting clarity of mind has led to all the great blessings of my life, whether that's financial success, career success, relationship success. I can trace it all back to my ability to find that connection and hopefully some people liking me along the way too.
And I think that it's important to say that not every spiritual practice, not every time we sit down or go on that walk or do anything that we're talking about, not every time that we do that do we have some huge. It feels like there's something incremental about it. There's this daily discipline, and that whatever we are disciplined about, it feels to me like the energy of that begins to blossom into our lives like a tree or a flower blossoming. And sometimes I couldn't even see the results of it until suddenly I looked back at my former self and said, oh my gosh, I'm so much more calm. I'm so much more centered. I feel so much more able to deal with things as they come up, and I could see that I had made progress along the way. So I think it's important to understand that this is an investment that we're making in ourselves that's small and can sometimes seem inconsequential, but in the long run of our lives actually has a huge benefit.
Yeah, and as we enter into exploring these spiritual practices, these are a few important things for you to know, that we're not just exploring the philosophy and the practices themselves, but there's really just a few things we really want you to do. One is do them consistently. It's a 28-day course, and we invite you to commit to doing it every day. Second, make sure you have a sacred space that you create for yourself to the best of your ability where you can do these practices. And really, with just 10 minutes a day, if you have more time, please utilize those. But with just 10 minutes a day, you can really make an incredible impact on your life.
Definitely. What's your sacred space like that you do your practice?
Well, it's interesting because it's changed a little in that we have a new infant baby at home. So the first thing to go was my meditation room and office, and so I create some different sacred spaces throughout the house. So if the baby's up and out, I'm in her room. If she's still asleep, I'm in my room, wherever it may be. But I try to find a place where I can be alone, but I don't try to trick myself to try and create a distraction-free space. I
agree with you.
Because if it's a baby crying or a lawn being mowed outside, the goal of meditation practice, for example, isn't to not be distracted, but it's to keep jumping back to center, as you were saying before. And so that's the goal for me. And I love the idea that when we have really established sacred space, it's something we can take with us wherever we go. Right. And so we both mentioned our cup of coffee. And so, an essential part of a long-term spiritual practice may be an altar. And so I always have a cup of coffee, and I always have a spiritual book. We were talking about spiritual influences, and mine are books that I can read over and over that aren't there for an intellectual value, but they're there to inspire me. Ernest Holmes' This Thing Called You, Shunryu Suzuki's Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. These books are books I've read 100 times that are always brand new to me. And so those two items and a comfortable place to sit are all I need. I used to sit cross-legged, but I learned over time that the most comfortable position is the most holy position by the fact that it's comfortable.
I agree.
How about for you? What's your sacred space like?
Well, it's fascinating because I do have a meditation space, a room in my house that I actually share with my dogs. They have little crates that they sleep in.
Holy creatures.
I know, holy creatures. And they're not usually in the space when I meditate. And then I have a special chair, and I utilize the footstool. I like music a lot. I think that you can do any of these practices that we're going to talk about, or any practice that's good for you, in silence or with music. But I'm a big music person, so I always have a little place for some music. I have my books that I'm utilizing. And what I find interesting is that the truth is, about half the time I use that space, and more often than not, I find that I just, especially this time of year, which it's summertime here in Denver, Colorado, and I have a space in my bedroom, in my bed, that feels to me like when I open all the windows that I'm in a tree house. And so it really feeds my soul. So I find myself being drawn to just put all my pillows up and prop myself up there after my husband's gone for work and just meditate right there in my bed. And I just feel like I'm in a little tree house, and it just feels really wonderful and holy and sacred.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I have to do as well is I always try to keep a notepad around.
Me
because
too.
I can quickly, especially if you're living a busy life, spiritual practice can be a way to forget all the stuff that you were supposed to do the day before.
Right.
And so I do for a while as I'm getting into it. If something comes up that's distracting me, I try to write it down. And get back to the spiritual work, and know, especially with my problems, it would be great if they went away. But generally, they have no problem waiting for me to come back to them.
As well as I find ideas pop up.
Yes.
I'll be meditating, and it seems like from the depth of my being, some great idea will emerge that I don't want to forget. So having something to write down, or I usually have my iPad near me and I can just write things down. But I think that's the key, is that we can get distracted and go back. And in fact, that really is the game that is afoot in spiritual practice. It's managing distractions, and it's the same in our regular life. As I go through my daily life, It's about managing the distractions that keep me from remembering the truth and being the truth and staying in my center and reacting from the place that I most want to react from. And the more I learn to manage those distractions in my spiritual practice within me and around me, the more I can do that in my daily life.
Yeah, beautifully said. And back to consistency, students, what we recommend isn't just that you do a spiritual practice every day, but try to find a similar time of day as well. So both Michelle and I like to meditate in the mornings. Some people prefer at night, but try and find that time of day. And again, if you have the time, pick a time in the morning and night.
Sure.
But even if it has to be on a coffee break at work, find that time that works for you. But do your best to make it a sacred experience.
Absolutely.
So what are our 4 spiritual power practices?
Well, I believe that we are going to work with appreciation and meditation. Those are the first 2, right? And then forgiveness.
Yes.
And prayer.
And prayer. 4 great spiritual practices that cross all sorts of different traditions.
Right.
Forgiveness, for example, is something that that master teacher Jesus taught us. Meditation comes to us at the heart from the Buddha, the gift of the Buddha.
Right.
And especially prayer comes to us from all traditions. But in our tradition, Ernest Holmes was a great teacher of affirmative prayer, and that's something that we're going to be looking at in this class as well.
Definitely. I think we're ready to get started, so enjoy the course.